And we're live.
Intro?
Intro. You're supposed to say the intro.
Oh my, I thought we were... Hello, and welcome to another Fracking Podcast. I'm Marty, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Joseph.
And if you're joining us for the... If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're tuning in again, thank you so much. We're so glad to have you back. Happy Star Trek Day if you're watching us live. Today's episode is Oops, Borg did it again, and we'll be discussing Star Trek Picard Season 3.
Okay.
Sorry
So
for the
today we
start.
are going to have technical difficulties and confusion. I think that is the perfect start to this episode, to be honest.
I mean, it's going to be a discussion anyway, so the fact that we're all not on the same page kind of makes sense because we're going to be talking about something where a lot of people are not on the same page.
It's very true. It's very true.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be fantastic. I'm very excited. It's going to be fun. I feel like we're going to have a lot of fun. And we're probably not going to agree on everything, and that's okay.
I think we can agree that we're not going to agree on everything.
Oh yeah. That's without a doubt.
But I think a good place to start. Oh, go ahead, Joseph.
No.
No, I was gonna say a good place to start is like first impressions, because we all of us watched this when it was airing live, like originally when it came on, and then we all recently rewatched it again in the last couple of weeks to kind of remind ourselves of what happened. What did we all think the very first time we watched season 3 of Star Trek Picard?
I thought that Worf looked incredible. Obviously, I was so excited to have him. Geordi also amazing, aged beautifully. It was really great to see the TNG cast, having grown up watching lots of TNG with my mom and my dad too. But I had problems with it watching it the first time, and I tried very hard to just let the nostalgia take over and enjoy it for what it was. There were so many fun Easter eggs, which were great to catch, but some of them felt like just a little too much. And when it came out, I described it to people as they got a whole group of Star Trek fans together, and they're like, "What was your favorite part of The Next Generation? What was your favorite episode? What was your favorite, like storyline? All of your favorites. We're going to put them in this big hat, and then we're going to pick out like one or two to throw in for season 3 of Picard." But instead of it being one or two, they just dumped the whole like bowl of ideas onto the writer's desk and said, "Include everything." That's what it felt like to me. It felt like they were trying to do too much, so nothing got like filled out and finished. But like they also probably could have had a really amazing like TNG movie. Like I loved the TNG movies. This could have been a really good TNG movie. But it was really stretched out.
Joseph, what was your first impression?
Okay, so I did like the nostalgia. I'm going to start there. And there were definitely, like, it was great for me to see Michael Dorn back as Worf. Because he had been at a con, and the initial conversation I had started with him, he was grumpy about not having been invited to Picard season 1. So this was right before Picard season 1 came out, which feels like forever ago, by the way. You're on mute, man. And So I changed the topic to airplanes, and he was totally happy, and it was a great interaction. But you could tell that, like, he couldn't hide the fact that he was a little bit annoyed that he hadn't even been invited back. Um, and like, I feel like this was this wasn't even pre-pandemic. I don't think. I can't remember how long ago Picard season 1 was.
I think they were
Um,
working on the series before the pandemic came out, and that's why it took so long to get the other ones.
That's right. And so this is like before we even knew who was in it. All the like,
Right.
yeah, yep. Um, there's so many comments that we will get to.
Yes, there's a lot of great comments.
So I enjoyed the nostalgia. I enjoyed the fact that Michael Dorn got to come back because I felt like he really deserved to be back. And this is just because I love Michael Dorn. I love the Worf character. I think of all the TNG characters, he had the most growth throughout all of the episodes he was in, of not just TNG, but also Deep Space Nine and the movies. I will never forgive. I was annoyed in season 3 initially because we never found out like who Worf's family was. And like the death of Jadzia really always bothered me. But there were several things that I didn't like. Jack as Picard's son was not believable because Beverly would never do that.
Which we will get to later because this
we
is
will
one of
get
my
to.
biggest bones of contention with season 3.
I felt like a lot of the character development was off, but I enjoyed the nostalgia enough that I did enjoy the show. So I'm gonna just because I will deep dive if I don't stop myself now. So I enjoyed it the first time I saw it, and I'm gonna leave it there with mixed feelings, but I enjoyed it, and I'm leaving it there.
So my feelings were a little more polarized when I first saw it. When I first saw season 3, I felt extremely cheated. I was very angry. I was like on board for the first few episodes. I kept watching, thinking, okay, they're going to pull off something here. They're going to surprise me. They're going to shock me. And it's going to be a happy shock. But then when I got to the surprise, I was so angry about what it was that I was just the one episode, like the nostalgia, I enjoyed it at the time, but not in the way I would have enjoyed it. Maybe if it had been a movie, like Van said, if it had been a TNG movie, if they hadn't been leading me on into believing that this was going to be going into Deep Space Nine direction, I think I would have appreciated it more. I think the use of the changelings as like fodder for the Borg for me was it did a disservice to all of the hard work that the Deep Space Nine writers and characters did to build up that species and the Dominion War. And so I was not happy with season 3 of Picard the first time I saw it. Did I cry when I saw everybody on the bridge? Yes, but that's like an emotional gut reaction. The rest I was not happy with. However, I have to say, having just rewatched it, now knowing what was going to happen ahead of time, my feelings are a little bit less extreme. I'm less angry about it now than I was when it first aired. But yes, Michael Dorn looked fantastic, and he absolutely had to be in the show. Although I have some problems with some of the things they gave him storyline-wise in season 3, just because I felt like he was very underutilized in his role. And I feel like, yeah. But I feel like, the characters that really made season 3 for me didn't have huge parts. It was the emotional connections between Geordi and Data, between Worf again feeling like he's out of place, like he did on Enterprise. He never felt like he belonged. And then the little bit we got between Deanna and Riker, like those moments I appreciated, but I felt like were kind of sacrificed for this elaborate plot that didn't have to be quite so elaborate.
It would have been a perfect movie.
It would have been a great movie.
I mean, yeah.
But I think also I think it would have been better. I think I would have appreciated better if before season 3 of Picard, we had gotten a single season of Deep Space Nine. Give us Deep Space Nine 8 as a prelude to season 3 of Picard. And then we could have seen the changelings as full-on villains in the Deep Space Nine season, not knowing that there was going to be any kind of twist. Then go into season 3 of Picard. I think it would have had a little bit more weight to it.
Okay, I will deep dive into that piece of it. Let's get to the characters first, but I have thoughts around that, and hopefully I remember those thoughts. But
Yeah.
I will absolutely say this comment from Scott really is how I felt about that entire season, because, and again, yes, it was kind of redeemed in Prodigy season 2, but Wesley needed to be in that. He just randomly shows up in season 2, but then there's no mention of him again in season 3. And I feel like there's no chance that he would not check in on his mom and his baby brother. Like, Wesley, who lost his father, I think would have, like, he's got time powers. So I know I'm talking about a character who wasn't on the show, but there's no way he wouldn't have been there for his brother.
I mean, it left a void.
It did.
I think he definitely could have been included, and I don't know why he wasn't. But there were lots of people that I felt should have been included in season 3 that were not, which brings us to our next topic on characters. Elnor, where did he go? We didn't even talk about him this season. We spent all last season with Rafi doing everything possible to get back to her kid, her surrogate kid. Yeah, there's the beautiful family. We, at the end of season 2, we had Seven and Rafi together. Finally, beautiful. I love it. And then they had their little adopted child, who was definitely Rafi's child at this point. We don't hear anything about him, which is an ongoing theme in this season. A huge plot point in this season is Jack Crusher. But then so many of the other cast members don't get any screen time talking about their kids. We have no idea if Worf had more kids after Deep Space Nine or was ever in a relationship again. We know nothing about him at all. We do get to see Geordie's 2 kids. I think Riker mentions his kids twice.
Yeah, he mentions his daughter, Kestra.
But it's in passing. We don't see her again. Wesley could have been included. But it's just like so many of these people are kids, and there should have been more like parenting, I feel, discussions with Picard, who is suddenly becoming a parent from the other parents, and that was not something that happened at all. He's like,
I think
"Oh, yeah, no, I'm a dad now."
That's a great point, because really the entire thing is about the next generation. It's about like the legacy that these characters have left for the next generation of Starfleet, or the next generation that's going to be potentially fighting the Borg or the Changeling or whatever the next villain out there is. And so we've introduced all of these young people. We've introduced the Forge daughters. We've introduced the trauma that the Rikers have gone through with the loss of their son and with their daughter. And then we have Jack Crusher. Why don't we learn more about what happened? Even Data. I mean, Data, the first season is about Data's children. Data never gets mention of his kids in season 3, which blew my mind, because I'm like, well, we're seeing everybody's kids. And then we see Data and we don't mention Daj or Soji at all.
We get, I think, a passing comment about Lal being integrated in to him.
Yeah, but
when they're in the
Dash and
Daystrom.
nothing.
Like, but then when he has to like fight inside his own brain, it's just Data and Lore and not any of the other personalities fighting.
I mean, Lol should have been there. I mean, I
Yeah.
teared up when Spot was there, and I realized that, of course, that's a meaningful moment that a lot of viewers would remember. We remember Spot probably more than we remember Lol, sadly. But yeah, it would have been great to have been able to see Lol in that.
Even B4, like we could have had a short scene of B4 being like, yeah, let's integrate like that. It wouldn't even need to be more than a few seconds because B4 would be like, yeah, okay, let's be like one android. This is fine. But it was just a passing mention, which was upsetting. Like
It was. Now, this comment, because they passively mentioned the fact that Girardi and her collective exists still. Right? Like
Yeah.
there's Borg, but
Yes.
they're, whatever.
Yeah, they're out there.
They're out there and they're like the snugly happy version of the Borg, not the real Borg, right? Like Shaw makes a comment about this. The fact that Girardi was not even, I don't think even mentioned by name.
I don't think so.
I think a lot of these characters like Girardi and Wesley, I feel like it was a situation where they couldn't bring them in without completely disrupting the plot and the storyline, because once you enter them into the equation, I mean, they could solve the problem quickly. And I think that was like a writing choice in order to make the plot a little bit smoother. Still not 100% happy about that because I think there were ways that they could have mentioned them or mentioned why they weren't there.
Yeah. I think Laris at the beginning, we get some beautiful scenes with Laris and Picard at the beginning. And this is another case of them just forgetting to mention someone again. They had some beautiful moments, and I was expecting the entire season. Oh, yes, this beautiful photo of the two of them.
I love her.
The way she looks at him, the way she absolutely adores him. And she's like, yeah, you have to go. And in my head, he should have said, Beverly told me to trust no one, but I trust you. And he should have taken her at the very least. I think she should have been brought along on this journey. But then he just decides, oh, I have a kid with Beverly who I haven't talked to in 20 years. We're going to just forget that Laris exists and I'm going to get back with Bev. Because that's worked out before so well. But yeah, I think it's criminal that Picard went through all of that growth with Laris to finally be open to a relationship and a family, and then he just drops her.
Well, the crazy thing too is like I completely forgot the first time I watched this season what happened to Laris because I was like, I remember that she disappeared and we never saw her again, but I was like, I couldn't remember, so I was really paying attention to the beginning. They're moving out together, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like he's packing up his
future.
stuff. He's like, I'm getting rid of my painting, send it off to Geordi. Like
he's leaving his vineyard for her.
Yeah.
And then he just he forgets about her. I'm like, what?
Let's talk about this, right?
Picard. Classic Picard, but
let's talk about this though, because this vineyard has been in his family for centuries.
And who's going to take it now?
It means everything to him because that's the last part of his past that he has.
Yeah.
And he has nobody to pass it on to. So he's leaving the vineyard forever. But then he gets a message from his crush and his old crush. And he goes, and rightfully so, goes off to save her because Laris even says, you have to do this, right? But it's like, it is so aggravating to me that the entire season 2 was about him learning how to love properly. And she just poof, after the first episode is gone. That's it.
I'm going to say this. I, for the most part, do not like any of the female characters in season 3, how they are portrayed. And I know we're going to talk more about this in a minute when we break down some of the characters that are actually seen. But yeah, the Laris hurts me so much. because it's just it feels like they used her. It's almost like Frigine. She's not dead, but she is.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically what John said, right? He basically gets a "you up" text from Beverly, and he drops Laris like a bad habit. Like, that is only John can do,
Yeah,
a very
I love
succinct
it.
way of how it felt to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it does feel like all that characterization they worked on the first 2 seasons to build up for Picard, that they kind of just threw it out the window to fan service this idea of having everybody on the bridge of the Enterprise, which they could have done without completely destroying his relationship with Laris. I think
But the fans wanted Bev and Picard together.
Yeah.
I think that was the big problem. So they had to.
Because I'm not even opposed to him giving up the vineyard. To me, it kind of makes sense. He spent all of season 2 learning how to come to terms with his past and finding a place where he can hold his past in understanding with relation to his family. It kind of makes sense to me that by the time season 3 rolls around, that maybe he's ready to put that behind him and move on. But that being said, what does he then do? He says at the beginning, we're moving on, we're moving someplace else. I'm following Laris, and then as soon as his past calls him again, he forgets what he learned. Yeah.
Everything.
Oh,
if I was Q, by the way, if I was Q,
I'd be pissed.
I would be so mad. So mad.
I mean, no wonder Q is giving up with him. He's like, I can't deal with this Picard anymore. Maybe the next one will be more fun.
Yeah, we move on to the next Picard. So those are some people from previous seasons that we thought should have been included more. But also, I think we should have had Deep Space Nine characters added to this season. 100%. There was no possible reason to have the Changelings as a villain and not include them. We get like one throwaway line from Worf about him having faced them in the past. That should have been his like lead up to calling Kira.
Yeah.
Julian. We could have had O'Brien and Geordi together when we meet up with Geordi later. Why O'Brien could have been there working on starships too. I mean, we could have had him there. There were so many possibilities to bring in Deep Space Nine crew members, and it would have made sense given that we were facing the Changelings. The fact that they don't even seem to call them, but they call Tuvok. Like, we get to see that.
Okay.
So there was a passing mention of Odo.
There was.
Without using his name. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, the actor had passed by then, right? So like he couldn't have been in the show. But the fact that they find out that something has been done to modify the Changelings and nobody calls Julian pisses me off. Mm-hmm. They mention curing the founders of the virus that Section 31 had created. It was fucking Julian. I'm sorry. I'm gonna start cussing because
I'm sorry.
They made
Mom.
it like all about Beverly. I'm sorry, Van's mom.
It's okay.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There should have been at least one Deep Space Nine character who came in and offered pertinent information as to what was going on post that sector of the universe, post Dominion War, essentially.
Yes.
And obviously, for obvious reasons, it couldn't be Odo, but it could have been Kira. We could have gotten a glimpse into what Sisko was doing. Now, if Sisko couldn't have been on it, which I think was probably a good choice considering the direction they went, they could have at least had Kira, and they could have had Kira mention maybe some kind of vague line that she is working with Sisko, or I mean, something where there is something going on, because obviously, they're still rebuilding Bajor probably after all of that.
I mean, just a call would have been fine. Like, I didn't even need them to like show up and be there for the rest of the season, but like a phone call, it's not that hard.
And I understand that they had to have somebody from Voyager in that moment to have it make sense that that Seven would know that wasn't them. So I understand bringing Tuvok in. But could we maybe have had somebody else instead of Rolaren?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's gonna take me to a whole other side of this that
I'm
is
so
pissing
mad
me off.
about Ro. I'm so mad about Ro.
I cannot even
See,
express.
this goes back to me being angry about all the female characters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's just talk about all the female characters. Let's just start with Ro.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the problem here? What's the problem, Van?
We essentially lost her in TNG, which was painful. And I hated. I loved her as a character. I wanted more of her. I wish she would have stayed. I understand why they wrote her character the way they did, but then we bring her back in Picard. That's amazing. And then we basically let her give Picard all of the information, make her no longer a useful character, and then blow her up.
The thing that bothered me the most about what happened with Ro in this series is that she basically lets Picard off the hook. She basically gives him an "I forgive you" moment and then dies.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to deal with the consequences except for like the momentary grief that he experiences. But like he's like genuinely mad at her. He's genuinely pissed. And honestly, his reasons for being angry at her for me never sat right. Like it never sat right with me. Because she obviously, you know, his calling is Starfleet, her calling was her people. And it always bothered me that he felt betrayed by her. And then for her to just be like, essentially just give him a pass and then die. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't.
Okay, so I will say that Ro was the only person who stayed true to character in this entire show.
I agree.
Thinking about the growth that Picard had throughout season 2, right? So let's take that away because he should not have been holding on to that anger.
He was hanging on to more anger over Ro than he was over Beverly.
He was
lying to him.
He was
for 21 years about his son.
Okay.
That we're gonna get to Beverly in a minute, and then we're gonna Marty is just gonna have a wonderful time. And I'm very excited for this. But yeah, I loved seeing Ro. I think that her exploding was unnecessary. Like she's like, I forgive you, Picard, even though you're still angry. It's fine.
It was a Tasha Yar moment. It was Tasha Yar all over again.
Wait. Okay. Hold that thought. So I don't follow Terry Matalas on social media because I am, and again, sorry, Van's mom. Fuck Rick Berman. But now I also have to say fuck Terry Matalas. I
can't argue with that.
As a writer, my feelings are mixed because I understand how difficult it is to make everybody happy, but there were definitely some choices that were made.
But okay, so I don't like when writers do this. When they write something and then people get mad at a certain point, like saying, "Oh, Ro exploded. We're angry about this." And then they're like, "But it's okay. She didn't really explode." Like, you didn't say that in your work. I just don't like it when they come back and they're like, "Oh, no. You misunderstood me because I didn't write anything.
I did a cut screen."
But here's the thing. If she didn't explode, what happened to her? Because obviously she was not in the rest of the show. Like, that's just...
But if she didn't explode, then what was the point? Because then where's the meaningful impact? Because there was a meaningful impact, albeit I wasn't happy with how it went down. But if you all of a sudden bring her back to life,
it is so pointless. I would have been much happier if she had made it to the other ship, and then it had been obvious that she had been captured by changelings on that ship. Like, oh no, that ship was taken over by changelings. Like, you could have even threatened her with something. Like, the changelings could have threatened to like kill her or whatever. You could have gotten the oh no Ro feeling without exploding her. And then especially coming back later and be like, no, she's fine. Don't ask me to
It's
explain it, but she's fine.
it's all lip service from Terry Matalas because he knows that he screwed up bridging all of the good female characters that were not main characters. And I'm gonna say this because, well, I'm not gonna force us to move on. If you guys have other things to say,
Yeah,
I'll go.
Well, no, I was just going to say,
done
I
with
agree
Ro.
with you that I agree with you that Ro was the only female character in this season who felt true to their character. And the one moment that made it for me real that this was really Ro and that nothing had changed with her character was the fact that she basically lets it known that she's not working for Starfleet because she wants to. Like, she's kind of forced into this position. And which made me, of course, want to know what happened. You know, how did you get into this position? What happened with the Maquis and Bajor and the rebellion that you suddenly find yourself having to work for Section 31 or whoever it is she's really working for? We don't even really. I think that was also kind of vague, but yeah. And the earring, mention of the earring, that was like, I was like, okay, this is the character that we remember from TNG, as opposed to some of the other characters.
Yeah.
Van, final thoughts on Ro?
I've said all I need to say about Ro. I am. We can move on. Which, you know, Elizabeth Shelby. I don't really have any thoughts about her. It was fun she was included.
I thought it was nice she was included as well. I thought it was a nice throwback to people who have been watching for a long time and actually remember these little details. So this character didn't bother me quite as much.
But she didn't really do anything. She wasn't on screen enough for her character to upset me. So
Okay,
I have no thoughts on her.
I'm going to tell you why I'm upset with this whole thing.
Okay.
Right? Because Shelby was very much working on the Borg task force and rebuilding the fleet. And you can tell that she got promoted and made her career about ensuring that Starfleet was safe, right? Which probably meant that she was behind or partly behind the android ban. Probably. But
I think
why would she put something on every new ship so that they could be easily taken over by a collective mind? Like, why would you mimic the thing you think is the biggest threat in the galaxy?
That's a good point. Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
That she wasn't on long enough to be as enraging as the whole thing with Ro was. But what they did to her was just as vile, I think, as what they did to Beverly. And I'm going to leave it there.
We can transition straight into Beverly now because we've been dancing around that long enough. All right. You want to just take over, Marty?
So I have a theory about Beverly in season 3. And my theory is that Beverly in season 3 is a changeling. You cannot convince me that this is actually Beverly Crusher. The reason I say that is because there's no way she would have kept her son from Picard. Her reasoning for keeping Jack from Picard makes 0 sense. And the reason it makes 0 sense is because she says that she knew that Picard never wanted to have a family or whatever, that Starfleet was his family. But there was that episode in TNG. Do you guys remember? I can't remember the name of the episode, but there's an episode in TNG where she and Picard have a mind link. And they are basically reading each other's thoughts for 45 minutes on the planet's surface. And she basically knows everything about him. She finds out his deepest, darkest feelings and emotions about everything. And that includes his family, which means that she would remember his memories of his childhood and things that we see kind of glimpse in the movies, including, this is obviously before the movies, but in the movies, we see him in the Nexus, right?
Yeah.
And he's like having Christmas and he's got this beautiful family. That desire for family and connection and children would have been deep inside of him. Beverly would have known that. She would have known that. So I feel like Beverly is a changeling.
I mean, Beverly being a changeling, Okay, fine. I'll take that leap with you. But the fact that Deanna didn't go looking for her at any point
Also,
for 2
also
decades, how is
makes no
she
sense.
not a changeling also? Because that is so out of character for her. And
The
they
only
had
thing
to make it so she didn't know about Jack, because the second she was near Jack, she's like, "Oh, fuck." Sorry,
Right.
mom.
I think the only saving grace I can give Deanna is that she has suffered a traumatic loss. She's lost a child traumatically. Her relationship with her husband is falling apart. They have a daughter who, to me, it feels like there's an estrangement there between the daughter and Riker that I feel like Deanna has been trying to, I don't want to say manipulate, but obviously we know that she was trying to kind of manipulate Riker's feelings and grief. But so the only saving grace I can give her for not reaching out is that she's got too much shit going on. That being said, they were so close. They were so close.
2 decades.
No, it's a long time.
2 decades. I actually, Bev, I think if I have my timelines right in my head, Beverly would have disappeared before Riker and Deanna had kids at all.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
it
yeah.
would have been before their kids were born and long before they lost their son.
Well, then
Because
it makes
Jack was
absolutely no
23.
sense.
Jack was 23.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's before. It
Um,
makes no sense at all.
It doesn't make sense.
Geordi didn't go looking for her. Even like Geordi not looking for her or trying to find her doesn't make sense to me, because as close as that crew was, and then for one of them to just disappear would, I feel, make all of them suspicious. And
I
then
mean, maybe
go
Deanna
looking.
was too busy having counseling sessions with Barkley
I
for the
mean,
last 20
that's
years.
fair. That's fair. Barkley probably takes up a lot of time.
Why was Barkley
However,
not in this? Anyway, sorry.
I wish
I
he
mean,
was. That would
he
have
should
been
have been in it.
amazing.
He would have been amazing. He should have been working at Daystrom
Yes,
on the
that would've
holodeck. The forbidden holodeck programs. It's hard to
doesn't make
reason why
sense.
Deanna wouldn't try to reach out to Beverly. It does feel very difficult.
And I think we get a line from Picard at the beginning when he's talking to Laris that Bev just basically told them she didn't want to talk to them anymore. And so they respected what she said. Which, yay for respecting boundaries, but also that's so out of character that immediately didn't tip you off to go track her down and be like, are you a changeling? Have you been captured? Are you under duress? Because that's so out of character for her. Please never talk to me again. Like, okay.
Oh, wait, nope, that's not the one I want. This. He should
Yeah, I
discover
love this.
transporter thing with his transporter phobia.
So
Okay.
Lieutenant Barkley was probably the first character that the changelings captured, just because of this. They're like Barkley will figure this out. We need to capture him.
Probably. That would, I don't know.
Who else do we have?
Jack, I know, is someone I wanted to talk about, but
23-year-old Jack.
it's
look,
he's a very pretty man. I think
who's
it's very
not
interesting
23.
that
He's the oldest looking 23-year-old I've ever seen. He's handsome,
this is
though.
TV. They're always incorrect.
It's space.
Yeah, it's space. I think it's very interesting that Beverly is trying to explain herself to Picard like, you are always in danger. It wouldn't have been safe for him. I was trying to keep him safe this whole time. But then she talks about sending him to school on Earth, which is where he picks up his weird British accent. That makes no sense. And she is also like, yeah, I told him to reach out to you, and he chose not to. Okay, which is it? Did you want him never to be around Picard so he was safe? Or did you want him to meet his dad?
So I think the reason he has a British accent is because he wanted to be close to his dad. I think he purposefully picked that up when he was young and as a kind of like, this is how I can be close to him, and that's it, without actually being close to him. I think that's why they let that slide.
I'm gonna let it slide because I think it's hilarious, but it's just so funny to me that she was
But all these
her
Frenchmen are speaking with a British
reasoning
accent.
was
Yeah.
I got to keep my kid safe, and then she sends him to school on Earth and says you should look up your dad.
Well, Earth is safe, so I mean, I can see her covertly sending Jack to school on Earth, and she did say when he was old enough, I told him to reach out, which means when he was an adult and he could make his own decisions, he had the right to know who his father was. So that doesn't bother me as it annoys me, but it doesn't bother me as much because they kind of talked about it. It still feels very much like, okay, so he turns 18. Why the fuck are you not talking to the rest of your friends now? Like, what happened in this 5-year period? You decide to just keep on doing crazy things, by the way, because way to go keeping him safe. He's been like attacked by pirates his entire life. That's so believable.
And how she reaches out to Picard, like, thank goodness he was packing up his house and heard his old comm badge go off. Like,
Yeah,
that's
because
how
because
we're
by the way,
contacting him.
Beverly knew him so well. She knew that he would keep his old comm badge in the drawer for the next 25 years.
I mean,
Not
to
just
be
in the
fair, I
drawer,
would.
but
I
like
would. My drawer is
she-
full of comm badges.
this is fair. This is fair, but like it's close enough to him when he gets the alert and it's still functional. It's
That
I
the power cell on those things is amazing, is all
okay,
I'm gonna
fine.
say.
The power works forever. What if he had been on vacation? I'm saying it's a really
Then they would
absurd
have
way to
died.
try and contact somebody in an emergency.
Yeah.
His old comm badge.
That being said,
I
I actually did like the whole Jack was born with Borg and nanites kind of thing. I
That
thought
was fun.
that was fun. I thought that was cool. I kind of saw it coming, but I thought it was cool. And I like his relationship with Sidney LaForge. I'm gonna say it. I'm on board for that ship.
That's cute.
I ship
That
them.
was fine.
Yeah,
I
like
ship
them.
them.
I like her a lot. Actually, I think
She was
the
super fun.
LaForge sisters for me were one of the most realistic things because I saw myself in these two sisters. I saw myself and my sister in this situation where, like, you know, dad clearly has a favorite. One has gone off to do something different, is kind of like breaking the mold. I mean, that definitely hit me. I felt that. So
And
I thought that was well done.
I
I
did like
love the
them.
sisters. I love the fact that Sid is different and adventurous. And also, by the way, doing the exact same job that Geordi did at first when he was
Right.
on the bridge,
Which
right?
is adorable.
So, like, in a way, like she even says, like, the reason I crashed so many speeders was because then I got to fix them with you. So, like, it
Which is cute.
shows this
Which is cute.
bond. And, you know, her sister, what's her sister's name? I forget.
Is it Alondra? I think.
Alondra?
Alondra. So I loved how she was trying to be the peacekeeper
Yeah.
and trying to be the diplomat, and she was just so Geordie in so many ways.
They were
Um,
well done.
So well done.
I wish we had gotten more of both of them. And I understand why we didn't get them at the end because they were little Borglings. But I think it would have been more fun if Sydney had been the one piloting the ship through the Borg cube. I think that would have been a great moment. But I understand that they had to have all the kids be little Borglings.
Baby Borgs.
Okay, so before I jump into my Geordie rant, let's talk about let's talk about
Oh,
other characters that we need to cover, right? So you said
Uh,
women. Let's talk about
are we going to talk about?
Raffi.
Right.
Okay.
I loved so much of her in this season. I loved a lot of the things she was doing. I think her being undercover threw me for a bit of a loop, but I got on board with it. And I think I would have been completely okay with probably 90% of her character if, when her and Seven were finally reunited, we didn't get the weird, awkward, like, hi, we got the, oh my goodness, you're safe. And then they like hug. Like, I don't even need a kiss. Like, they just hug. Like, it's perfectly reasonable for somebody to not talk to their partner while they're undercover and you can pretend that the relationship ended. But the fact that we lost that entire relationship with no explanation whatsoever, um, that bothers me a lot.
Uh,
And that's the
Go
thing is
ahead.
this season just did not focus on the crew of Picard at all. It focused on the old crew, which is fine. Okay,
You don't
fan
even
service.
it takes 2 seconds. It
It,
takes 2
it does.
seconds when
I
they're
think
meeting to give a hug. That's all you needed to do. Instead, you just pretended that uh, essentially there is no mention of the two of them really in a relationship, which what was all of season 2 for? What and part of season 1,
I
really?
think this is my biggest complaint with this entire season is that I feel like characterization was thrown out the window and plot to some extent was also kind of thrown out the window in order to build up to this moment of having everybody standing on the bridge of the Enterprise D. And I think literally every single thing that they did, every choice that they made was to build up to just that moment, as opposed instead of giving us these little defining character relationship moments. You know, there should have been more moments like the one we get between Deanna and Riker when they finally are kind of like, you know what, when he's finally like, you know what, I messed up. I did wrong. Or when Geordi and Data finally have that moment of like, we're together again. Like, I felt like all of those were kind of put on the back burner in order to build up this moment of just seeing everybody on the bridge. And that moment on the bridge was beautiful, and it was really, it felt like something in the moment for people who watched The Next Generation religiously growing up, but at the expense of all of these character things, like you're saying, like at the expense of Seven and Raffi, at the expense of Ro and Picard actually having like a real moment, or, you know, Jack and Sydney.
So there's one thing here on Raffi before we go too far off the and I'm sure he meant retreading of her addiction, not addition.
Yeah.
I don't know that she did anything wrong with math, but um I agree with Scott on this because we already
Yeah,
talked about her addiction and we didn't need to go back there.
I
And to
agree.
me, like I loved 90% of her character. What I didn't like is the fact that it just seemed to be like a way to make her character look weak and broken again. And we've already gone through this.
I think there are
Um,
other ways that you can be estranged from your family.
Yeah.
I mean, she was undercover. That is the biggest way. And the first thing she does undercover is reach out to her family.
Yeah.
Like, mm,
She doesn't have to
look,
be addicted to be estranged from her grandson and her son.
no. I mean, the fact that she's doing undercover work and she's like had this secret life, like that's enough for that strain on the family, right? The fact that you can't talk about some of the things that you work on. And look, I'm not anywhere near that level, but there are things I can't talk about, even with the people that I live with. And that puts a strain on relationships, right? Like,
Mhm.
why are you so upset? I can't talk about it. Is like a horrible thing to deal with. Um,
Yeah, I did not. Seven looks gorgeous in this season. Moving
Seven's
on. Seven
perfect.
looks
I mean,
gorgeous.
finally gets the uniform that she needed to have 20 years ago.
It never made sense to me that she didn't get it in Voyager. I could go on a whole rant about that. I would love to do a whole episode about costume choices for women in sci-fi. That would be really fun for me.
That would be awesome.
I don't understand why she came back to Starfleet. That's my first thing.
So that
For
actually did
Raffi?
carry over.
7. I don't understand.
No, I mean, like, did she do it for?
Well, that
did she
carries
do
over.
it for Raffi? Why did she come on as a commander and not straight to a captain? Her experience with the Rangers would have probably been better suited to her being a captain. I can understand, okay, she joined Starfleet. She's got to be first officer for a little bit and then captain.
She's got glowing recommendations from Janeway and Tuvok.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense that she is there. I would have liked if she was captain of the ship and Shaw did not exist at all. I think we could have had the exact same plot happen without Shaw. He is actually in no way necessary for the entire season. He does not add anything of value. And I know Marty's going to argue with me on this one. I know she is, and that's fine. But you could have had 7 as captain of the Titan and had every single plot point essentially moving forward from there.
I will say that was the setup at the end of season 2 because Picard gave her command of the Stargazer. Like that was foreshadowed, so I could see her going to Starfleet because of that whole thing. But you're right. Why was she a commander and not a captain? Go ahead, Marty. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it would have been an interesting dynamic if she had been the captain of the Titan and Shaw was first officer. Because then it would have been, once it was discovered that there was a Borg collective involved, it would have been interesting to have seen a bridge mutiny against 7. So I will give you that. But yeah, I don't know why she wasn't given a command. But I don't have quite as many hateful feelings towards Shaw as you do.
This goes back to me thinking that they did not write any of the female characters well. Not only did they not give 7 a captain chair, but they put her directly under somebody who treated her terribly the entire season. And so Raffi had to deal with her addiction. We had to give her something that made her look weak. Deanna, we first see her in the season in prison, in distress. Bev, we see her and immediately she gets shot and put in, like, we just take all of the female characters and then we put them in danger or distress. And it really bothers me because I don't think that it's necessary in any of these cases.
Okay. So I'm going to bring up the next character we're going to talk about.
Okay.
And I'm going to mute myself.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding. No. Let's talk about Shaw because we've been dancing around how we feel about this character.
I think Shaw was necessary. I think we needed Shaw. I think we needed Shaw because Picard was so out of character. Somebody needed to put him in his place. And honestly, that scene where Shaw steps up and is basically like, Locutus destroyed everything. To me, that was a moment I've been waiting for since TNG. Now, there were some moments in TNG where this kind of happened. We get that kind of moment with Sisko at the beginning of Deep Space Nine. But I feel like this is a part of Starfleet and Star Trek in general that we like to ignore. We like to talk about the utopia of the Federation, but we don't like to talk about the trauma of the Federation. And I think that Shaw was important to bring forward the darkness that exists in the society and that we are not perfect. We are humans. We are problematic. We dislike people we don't understand, even when we are being the best of ourselves. And I think Shaw was a perfect example of this. I am not 100% happy with how his character's arc went. I thought it was a little too forgiving there at the end, that he was suddenly like calling her 7 and then, he dies. Again, a Rolaren moment. He forgives her forgiveness so that she can move on, even though she doesn't really need to move on because he was the one that was problematic. But I do think it was good to have a character who was defiant against the characters that we as the viewers were supposed to be loving and who we believed in for the last 25, 30 years of our lives. It was nice to see the opposite perspective, the perspective of somebody who had to live in a society that was destroyed by Picard and the people on the Enterprise. So I like Shaw. I don't like that he died the way he did. I think that could have been done differently, but
I agree with you that him standing up to Picard and there being somebody there that's like, you guys, you did all these wild, crazy things in your TNG years. Like they did some wild off the book stuff. I don't have any problem with that part of his character. My problem is you're telling me a Starfleet captain would call his first officer by a name that she does not go by. Like in 2024, that is seen as horribly disrespectful. And I'm if somebody's name is William, and they want to be called William or they want to be called Will, to just not go by the name that they want to go by.
No, I agree with that, but I think that's why they did that. I think that's why they did that, was to show that humans have a long way to go. We're not as progressive as we think we are, even in the 23rd, 24th century. And I think that's why they did that.
It made me so angry.
I mean, I think it was supposed to make you angry.
Angry at Starfleet. Like, Starfleet is okay with this. We're okay with this.
I mean,
there isn't
Starfleet
a chain
hates
of
the
command
Borg.
for Seven to be like,
Well,
yeah, you have to call me
it's the
by
same
my
as like
name.
in Strange New Worlds, the situation with Una, the situation that Julian was afraid of in Deep Space Nine, of being different, of being something that Starfleet doesn't agree with. And it's the same with Seven, her being part Borg. I think that's just the part that they haven't overcome yet. They haven't surpassed. It shows it shows Starfleet's weakness.
I think I would have forgiven his character being absolutely awful, and I would have loved to hate him, because there are plenty of people that I think are, like bad people, but their characters are wonderful and I love them and I love to hate them. But I think them trying to let him off at the end by showing his private log killed anything for that character that I could have felt, because they're like, oh, we had this guy be an asshole the whole time. Like the whole time he was an asshole to everyone, but it's okay because like inside his head, he was a nice guy the whole time.
No, that I agree with. I don't like that.
That just makes me feel icky, because so often in media, we're given this guy who treats other people terribly, but the writers make it out like, oh, he's actually just a nice guy.
And this is the nice guy trope, and this is very much who Terry Metalis is. Like, he was trying to do something, and he messed up, because at the end of the day, Terry's just not capable of understanding how disgusting that was.
Yeah,
and to me, I did love to hate Shaw up until that point, and that really bothered me. Like the whole thing, I was able to forgive a lot because he obviously hates the Borg, and here's his first officer, a former drone. So like I could even see that he was this jerky to her specifically because he has a deep-seated hatred because of what he went through. Like that would have made the character so much more relatable.
Yeah.
But like you've already said, like both of you have already said, at the end, they turned him into a hero who was just an okay guy. I was like, no, that's not how the world works.
I think we still could have gotten a really nice clip of his log. But it could have been something different, or Tuvok could have just said, despite the fact how Shaw acted, he did put in a recommendation for you. I mean, we could have had something that said, we are giving you the captain chair.
Honestly, I think they should have just left Shaw alone, and instead of his log, had Janeway say something.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna.
I mean, somebody who actually knows Seven and respected her. Because I like a character that you can hate. And I like, you know, morally gray villains. I like to see a kind of character arc there. His was too fast. His didn't make sense. And then of course the log kind of disavows like everything that he did beforehand doesn't make any sense then.
Like he was
I think they should have just
outwardly an
left him.
asshole.
I think they should have just left him with that single parting moment that he had with Seven when he died.
Yeah. I would have liked his character if we did not get, oh, but I'm a nice guy in my head.
I think that's a different discussion though, is which characters can get away with being full on villains and who has to have a redemption arc. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is a pattern we're seeing a lot of TV and film lately, that a certain group of people always gets a redemption arc no matter how evil they are.
We don't always need the redemption arc.
I think that takes away.
Oh, I loved seeing Tim Rusk back.
I just needed to put Tuvok up there because I needed to see Tuvok and feel better about the fact that he promoted Seven.
He's fantastic. I love Tuvok.
I'm okay with him promoting Seven. I understand people wanted Janeway, and I would have liked to see Janeway come in, but I am totally okay with it being him. I think he came in and he did an amazing job. His acting, as always, was phenomenal. The promotion doesn't bother me.
I'm hoping. My hope is that the reason it wasn't Janeway is because there is a plan for Janeway. And maybe it's a Prodigy thing. Maybe it was just because of Prodigy, or maybe she wasn't available. But
maybe they had already spent too much money on people.
That's true. But he was. I liked having him back, Tuvok.
Do we have any other characters we want to talk about before we move on?
I have to talk about Geordi real fast.
Okay.
I have to say, look. Geordi was not believable as Geordi for the simple fact that he allowed himself to have a favorite daughter and allowed himself to be estranged from Sid. And that makes no sense to me. I can see there being strife, but Geordi was always like the perfect person towards every one of his friends, being super supportive, accepting them for who they were. Like he was very much,
except for when he's on the holodeck.
You know,
okay.
No. Dr. Brahms might have something to say about that.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but we also lost 20 plus years of growing up with his kids. And I have to say that sometimes you get a kid that is very, very different than you, or sometimes worse, is too much like you. And I think in this case, Sydney is too much like him, but also a bit more adventurous. So he sees himself, but he also sees that she's more willing to take risks that he would never take, which causes him, as a parent, a lot of distress. So as a parent, I can understand how, like, he probably tried really, really hard to keep her safer, especially because she kept crashing things. And he was definitely worried about her. And she rebelled against that. So, like, I think he would have worked harder. But I do understand that being a parent changes you. And being a parent and that relationship with your children is very different than any relationship with friends or family. Like, it's a completely different dynamic. So I'm going to give him a pass on it, but I do see what you're saying. We didn't need the division between the two characters.
It served no purpose, really. I get it, but also I don't get it. Plus, I probably would get it more if I actually knew who he married, because, you know, he finally did get married and had kids, but we can't know who it is because that would be too much fan service.
We don't even get a name. We just call your mom. We're not going to make it home for dinner. We get mom. That's what we get. We don't even get a name. But yeah, let's move on.
Okay, where are we moving on to?
Plot. It could have been a movie. It would have been a great movie. I would have loved it as a movie. Another TNG movie. I'm here for it.
I think for me, the biggest problem with the plot is that the first 8 episodes should have been Deep Space Nine.
Easily should have been Deep Space Nine.
And I understand now, having watched it a couple times, that it should not have been a surprise to me that the Borg were the big bad in this, because the Borg were essentially a big part of every season of Picard. They were kind of the big bad in all of them, in a way. So it shouldn't have been surprising to me. I just was so excited about this possibility that this is like a continuation of the Dominion War and the changelings being, because that, to me, that was plausible. That made sense, that they have spent all of this time after the Dominion War kind of rebuild their forces and come back and take it out on Starfleet. That made a lot of sense to me. But I think it should have been 2 separate stories. I think there should have been the plot line with Jack and Picard and the Borg, and then there should have been a changeling plot line, and that should have been given to the Deep Space Nine people.
I agree.
I can't argue with that.
And I think if they had done that, this could have been a great movie. This could have been a great one.
It could have been
one film.
2 whole movies, to be honest.
We could have had 2 separate movies. But
so
I think we either needed a much longer season, which we don't get anymore. Thank you, streaming. So we could have fleshed out a lot of the plots that we kind of started or hinted to, or it should have been a lot less. And I say this about a lot of seasons that we're getting on streaming now, because I feel like they don't have enough, but also they have too much. A mini series, it would have been a great 3-parter, just 3 episodes, which I felt the same way about season 2 of Picard. I think 3 episodes, maybe hour-and-a-half episodes, would have been perfect for season 2.
I am glad that they did bring up the Dominion War, though, because I have felt like Star Trek has always been kind of like, what do we do with that? What, like, after that? And there's so much, and I just wish it had gone down a little differently.
Yeah,
I agree with that. If we had 2 more episodes, we could have had at least Kira, at the very least, right? Like maybe maybe Bashir. Like it didn't have to be the full TNG
I mean,
crew.
it could have been Bashir and Dax.
That would have been great.
It would have been fine. I don't think Cole Meany actually wants to do Star Trek anymore, so that I think, the pipe dream of having O'Brien would never have happened, to be honest. But the other actors seem more than willing to step back in if they could.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I mean, the Kira's actor just had a book come out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So,
the mention of Odo would like just hit me because I know we lost.
Yeah.
I forget the actress name now, Renee something. But it would have been so much more fulfilling to have had Worf talking to Kira about this whole situation.
Yes. And I think it would have made more sense for Worf's character as well, because the thing about Worf, like you said early on, I mean, he had the best character development of any character in The Next Generation because of his placement on Deep Space Nine. And that was what was the most striking to me in this season, was that Worf didn't fit because he was on Deep Space Nine. He didn't belong with this crew anymore. They weren't his crew. And so, yeah, it would have been, and I think that's why maybe they gave him more time with Raffi. It made more sense for him to connect with somebody else who wasn't part of the TNG crew. But it would have been nice to have had a moment between him and somebody from Deep Space Nine, even if it was just a phone call being like, hey, what's going on at Bajor? You guys have changeling activity going on?
Yeah. I mean, they really were his family. To be honest, like Picard always kind of just treated him as the muscle, and like he cared for him kind of, but Sisko was legitimately a much better mentor for him than Picard ever was.
It was a different relationship.
We had a great comment in the chat earlier. Like,
Worf's really, yeah.
Nobody from TNG showed up to Worf's wedding, so how close were they really? I mean, that's a fantastic point. You would think that at least Deanna would have showed up.
I
And I will have to say, there was a little bit of weirdness between him and Deanna in that one episode. I know that they did that on purpose, but that felt kind of unnecessary to me at this point in their lives, at this age, at this stage.
They really just wanted to give Worf lots of snappy one-liners, which didn't really fit his character at all. Like, I laughed, they were funny, but it's just like not Worf.
It would have been much more interesting to have had Deanna say something to him about his change, like his life change, his philosophy change, because that was interesting. I wanted to know, is this philosophy change because of Jadzia? Is it because of something else that happened in the last 20 years? Like, why are we suddenly the pacifist Klingon? I mean, that's way more interesting to me than these witty one-liners.
It feels like he must have gotten remarried, but we don't touch on any of that.
It feels like there was something that happened. Yeah, I agree that there was something that happened.
Okay.
On the level of Jadzia.
Are we done with plot? I feel like we've talked about plot as we have discussed characters. I just really want to talk about production issues.
Let's do it.
I know I'm speeding us along. This is a very common thing in a lot of TV and movies right now, where we just don't have any lighting, and I hate it. I want to go back to when we were making movies, even black and white movies, and you would turn off the lights and then they would turn on a different light so that the audience could see what was happening. Yes, it's happening in the dark, but you can still see it. Whereas I get my screen all the way up to full brightness and I'm still like, what's going on?
Yeah, I don't like it.
I mean, I don't like it either. I don't like it either. I see from thematic, symbolic perspective that for the writing, it makes sense. Everything is in darkness until we are on the bridge of the D, and now we are light again. We are going to be the saviors of the universe. I understand like the symbolic effect of that, but I missed so much the first time around watching this because I watched it when it aired. It was nighttime. It was dark. And I couldn't see what was going on the screen because it was also nighttime and it was also dark.
Yeah. I understand, but I want to see what's going on. That just bothers me, and it bothers me in every show and movie. It's a very common thing right now. It's not just season 3 of Picard. It's a thing right now, and I don't like it because I like seeing what's going on. And people saying, "Oh, you just have a bad TV. Oh, you just need to turn up the brightness." I'm like, "Oh, they could just afford a light bulb, right? Like, buy a light bulb."
It doesn't really make sense either to be on a starship with like all that technology and you can't even see the person working at comms next to you. What is going on? Of course, it's easy for them to be like Borgified because you can't see them.
I think that bothered everyone that I've talked to about it. I'm sure some people like it. That's fine. The lighting could have been better. And you can get some very beautiful lighting that would have still given you the dramatic difference when we get on the Enterprise. Like, and everything is brightly lit. You could have still had that effect with clever lighting without having it super dark the whole time. It's fine. Also,
it bothers me.
Yeah, and the music was bad because they've replaced the person in charge of music. Season 1 Picard had the best intro music, and I think they changed it in season 2.
Well, season 3 was Jeff Russo. Who did it in the first season? I don't remember.
But I know they changed the theme, and I liked the season 1 theme the best.
I did like the season 1.
I did not appreciate that we started with a Fallout song to start.
Oh yeah, that was weird. I forgot about that.
Fallout song. I'm sorry.
It is now. It's
been a long road.
Yeah. Okay.
That
That
Yeah,
was a
good
weird
point.
choice. I understand that they were trying to do some of that style music because that is something that Beverly and Picard like bond over. I understand that. I think that was a bad call as that particular song is synonymous with Fallout now. It
Yeah,
was
but
in
this was
Fallout
before.
3. It was in
Oh,
well,
wasn't it
it's
was
in the
in the
game.
game.
It's a
Oh, okay.
big in the game. And then
Not a
yes, they do
gamer.
use it in the show.
Oh. Well, knowing that, then that was probably not a wise decision.
It might have been somebody who
I
played Fallout and thought it would be funny to add in.
I will say though, I think especially towards the end of the Picard is jumping towards the screen here. I will say that I think towards the end of the season, when they started integrating the music from the Next Generation and the music from the TNG films, I did like those lyrical moments. But I agree with you that I did think that the overall musical themes of the first season were much stronger.
Yes.
But it didn't bother me, except for that, the Fallout song. Except for that song, it's okay.
Yeah, the costumes were on point. What I could see of them, if I
These
had
were my
better lighting,
favorite
I could have
costumes.
had more to say about the costumes.
These are my favorite costumes of the entire Picard series so far, which is
They were
interesting
really
because
good.
every single season of Picard gets a new Starfleet uniform,
They
which makes
do.
it very hard for me as a cosplayer because I do not have that kind of money.
Those
I do
leather
think these ones were the
jackets that they
nice.
get are so nice. I
Okay,
want
but
one
here's my
so
problem with the
bad.
leather jacket. My problem with the leather jacket is
You're so expensive.
no. My problem is that we see the leather jacket in the series. We're like, that's awesome. They find Data. Data's wearing this like whatever kind of like coverall thing, and then suddenly Data's on the bridge of the Enterprise and he's wearing a leather jacket too. I'm like, who stopped? And it was Geordi's like, I'm gonna stop and give Data a new jacket before we go to battle because we all gotta be looking chic here on the Enterprise. Like, what? Data, where did you? Which lieutenant did you steal that jacket off of on your way out the door?
They replicated it. It's
They have
fine. They didn't
replicators.
steal it.
They didn't have to
Yeah,
go to like Nordstrom's or something. Like it's
that
fine.
did
Yeah, but
that did bother me.
the moment because I was like,
but
they
it,
had to figure out how to get him in that uniform.
again, we needed that moment on the bridge of the Enterprise where everyone's looking fantastic. So, like, we just have to put him. We don't have to explain it. We just have to put him.
I
in
just
a
want the
leather
deleted
jacket.
scene where Geordi's like, hold up, Data. You're not in uniform. Put this on. Okay,
Yes.
now we can go.
I need that deleted scene. That would be hilarious. But yeah, the costumes were on point. All 3 seasons of Picard have been very good in costumes. I think that whoever is doing costumes has done a fantastic job.
But I'm with Scott on this comment that the biggest issue with modern Trek is they seem to have uniform ADHD and inability to commit to a uniform. This is true.
Yeah.
And I think this is about
they do bounce around a lot, and that does bother me. But that's
Okay.
I'll let them have it.
We do have to talk about something that we forgot.
What did we forget?
There are 2 things.
I didn't forget. I left it out on purpose because it's just pointless.
No. Look. So we didn't talk about the big bad who wasn't the big bad at all.
Oh,
I loved that.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought her motivation, having been tortured at Daystrom and then breaking back into Daystrom, actually made a lot of sense. Her taking the face of her torturer, I think that was phenomenal. The fact that she was then just a tool for the Borg bothered me because if they had been working together or she had been the big bad the entire time, I fine. But like she goes from being tortured at Daystrom to being a pawn for the Borg. There was so much buildup of her character, and I thought she was really, really well done. And then that kind of irked me. But no, overall, I loved her.
But this is why I think that we needed a Deep Space Nine like prelude. Because if we had seen her as the full-on villain from start to finish in something else, I mean, she was scary. She was good. she was more intimidating to me than the Borg.
Yeah, the Borg were nothing. That was anticlimactic. I'm sorry.
I do have some difficulty with the whole being tortured at Daystrom, but then again, this is the dark side of Starfleet, the dark side of the Federation that we don't talk about. And this is why, to me, going back to like Shaw, why I can accept that there are people like that in this organization, because you have people who are doing this to her.
Yeah.
So, but that is fantastic.
I did not like that any group of change, because I know that this is not part of the Great Link, that they're an offshoot. I don't think that any founder would be okay being a puppet. And that's what bothered me. Like, if it had been the Pa Wraith to be the big bad this season, that would have made so much more sense to me.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I thought we were going to get some version of Ducat coming back or something like that. I know
that would have been interesting. That would have been interesting.
Like, I thought that we were going in Pa Wraith direction. Yeah. But you're right. It doesn't make sense that a founder wouldn't that would allow themselves to be a pawn in somebody else's war.
It is strange. It is, yeah.
Especially a solid.
It is strange. Yeah.
Sorry. ADHD moment. I just had to.
No, that's
fine. You're fine.
Fantastic. That's a great point.
So after watching it for a second time, I think my feelings did not change dramatically watching it a second time. I did not get the nostalgia, fun hormones, excitement the second time to the degree that I got it the first time watching it. I just had more questions. I'm like, but why did you do that? Why did you do that to that character? So for me, it was less satisfying the second time watching it through. I don't know that I will ever, for any reason, watch it a third time, which is disappointing because I'll watch TNG on repeat forever.
What about you, Joseph? What did you feel like watching the second time?
I liked it a lot less.
Interesting.
So the first time around, I was able to kind of forgive Shaw, and I liked his character a lot more the first time around. And then going into it the second time around, I was like,
already knowing his character arc?
Already knowing his character arc, it really kind of just pissed me off, to be honest. Like, there are a lot of things that I kind of just ignored the first time around that just it ended up eating me up a lot more. And my baby brother is basically me, but 20 years younger. And I told him we were doing this episode, and he starts like just going off on everything, on Beverly, on like the changeling thing. Like, and we talked about it, and I'll be honest, like, when I was going through the rewatch, it was hard to ignore these things because the first time around, I just wanted to see. I'll be honest, I wanted to see Worf.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to Worf. I was looking forward to Geordi. I was looking forward not to Data, because I don't think we should have brought back Data at all. That was kind of creepy to me. I really feel like it should have been.
I hated that less the second time, but I still, whatever.
It feels like it could have been another character to kind of fill in. But regardless, it did not hit for me. It has no rewatchability because the nostalgia is not there, right? Like, I already got it, and it's like, okay, great. So now I get to technically analyze everything, and it just pissed me off.
Yep.
To be honest.
See, I had the opposite effect. Like, I hated it the first time I watched it, and actually the second time I watched it, I was like, yeah, I'm more on board with it the second time than I was the first time.
I love that for you.
I was hypercritical the first time. And I think knowing what was going to happen, so like I know I'm not going to get my hopes dashed because I already know what's going to happen. I think that played a big part of it. I think also watching it a second time, I could give more focus to the characters who were not the TNG leads. I could pay more attention to Jack and Sydney and Seven and Raffi than I did the first time. Because the first time I'm just like, I want to see what's going to happen with all the TNG characters. I want to make sure that they're all going to live, so I could pay more attention to everybody else. And I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in the subtleties of the background characters. I mean, I hate calling like characters like Jack and Sydney background characters, but they essentially everybody became background characters once the TNG group joined.
Yeah.
So
Once
I actually enjoyed it.
Together.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed it more the second time around. I felt like I could be less critical because, and maybe it's because I'm a writer. When I watched the first time around, in my head, I was like, okay, these are the directions that we could go in. We can go in this direction. We could go in this direction. We can go in this direction. And I kept thinking to myself, I wouldn't do this because, and then listing the reasons in my head. And then they went that way. And I was like, what? Okay. And then then I had to reevaluate. Okay, well, now they've done that. There's going to be a double back somehow. There's going to be and then there wasn't. And I was like, okay. So I don't know. I enjoyed it better the second time around. It's still not my favorite. I don't even know because all of the seasons of Picard kind of let me down because of the next season. You know, like I enjoyed season 1, but then I was disappointed in the fact that season 2 didn't follow through. And the same here. Like I was okay with season 2, but then I was disappointed that there wasn't follow through.
Yes.
So that was my biggest problem.
There's just so many plot points that just bothered me throughout this because I knew about them and I was like, knew they would not get resolved, right?
Yeah.
Like, if Shaw hated the TNG crew so much, why would he transfer command to Riker? I knew he was injured, but still, like, why would he trust them if he knew what their reputation was?
Yeah, that's a good
Why
point.
are power systems incompatible in the holodeck between the holodeck and the rest of the ship, where in every other series that's not the case? It's just so many things. Why didn't Picard use his positronic brain to like override the stupid security codes? Why did they need data for that? Like, what? There's so many that just like.
I was mostly upset about Moriarty, to be honest. Like the Moriarty thing bothered me a lot.
The Ring doorbell. As
I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to talk about it. That.
Well, let's talk about Kirk then. What about Kirk?
Let's not talk about Kirk.
Did we like that Easter egg or no?
No.
That was pointless.
I think it's creepy that they're collecting bodies of captains at the Institute. I think that's creepy. I think that's gross. At some point, we're going to do a podcast about future technology. And the one I bring forward is probably going to be some weird way of taking care of our dead or bringing up how they do it in Star Trek. Because I have a lot of feelings about this. And to be like, just why do they have his body? Why did they take Picard's body? Why did no one realize that they had Picard's body?
I like these comments that Sean's making.
Yeah.
That the big problem with the series is this lack of cohesiveness. And this, for me, is the biggest problem between all 3 seasons, is that it feels like when you would think it should feel chronological, or it should feel like it goes like one after the next. But it really feels like when I remember watching the first season, then going to the second season, and I'm being like, how much time has lapsed in between? It feels like
we will never know.
Was it a day? Was it 10 years? It felt like there was the time difference was weird. And I felt the same here between season 2 and season 3. I felt like it didn't feel like a cohesive sequential time sequence of events.
They are not.
And I think it's because the characters didn't carry their development forward.
Well, Raspy was like first officer in season 2, and then she's suddenly undercover in the middle of nowhere. Like, that a promotion? I don't understand what's going on. Okay. There's so much of it, right?
Okay, we will be here all day.
But here, so Ryan makes a great point here. I'll just bring this up because this can be an ending if we wanted to. The Picard feels like 3 separate shows instead of one continuous show, and this is why I feel like all of them would have been better as movies. As they should have made 3 TNG films. I think that would have been very interesting.
Yeah. That would have been great. I'm on board.
And instead, maybe given Worf a show that could have been a Klingon / DS9 collaboration or something like that, or maybe you had fun. Yeah, I think we're done.
I
Sorry.
think we're done. Van.
Okay. That concludes episode 6. Oops, Borg did it again. We're so glad you tagged along. Please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Send us to your friends, your family.
Warn your mom about the profanity.
Please warn your mother before you send it to your mom. But yeah, we will be back in a couple weeks with a as yet untitled and unknown episode.
Later, everybody.
Bye.
Going out to explore. TuneIn comes to another frackin' podcast. Time travel, wormholes, and more. Chevron's locked on another frackin' podcast. Debating all the lore. We get signal of another frackin' podcast. Nerdy topics galore. Systems go for another frackin' podcast.